What is going on, everybody? What is going on, everybody? My name is JeffLightsyJr. here with the Black Boss Channel with Victor Formation. I have a special guest in the building today, Dr. Cavil. Dr. Cavil, how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well, brother. It's
It's
good to be with you. I see what you're doing, all these great things, getting it out there. I see you beating the path, man. I see you beating the path.
I appreciate it, Dr.
Hold
Cavil.
up that
Dr.
light, as
Cavil's
they say. Hold up that light,
hey,
as they say.
always. Oh six to the good brothers. Oh six to the good brothers. Dr. Cavil is the host of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Go check out Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Now, Dr. Cavil, I have to ask you this. I watched your interview with the co-founder of HBCU Go, Mr. Curtis Simons, and you guys spoke about a Bahamas Bowl in the 90s. So that right there just let me know both you and I'm not trying to call you old or nothing, but that let me know you and Mr. Curtis been doing this for a long time. How did you get into this space covering different HBCU sports and then the creation of HBCU inside the HBCU Sports Lab later, I'm assuming?
I still have my hair, but it's gray. So, to say the old part, it is what it is. And I tell a lot of folks, keep living, and it's certainly better than the alternative. So I have no problem with that. With that being said, yes, I kid because I care, and I appreciate you getting the chance to see that and acknowledging that space with Curtis Simon. So I go back with him in terms of the 90s with some other games when he was working in there. The HBCUX was in the early 2000s. But you're absolutely right. We go back. And that game was a game between Texas Southern University and Central State, his alma mater, and obviously the institution that I currently work for in developing the sport management program, serving currently as the interim associate dean of academic affairs and a professor in the Department of Health Kinesiology and Sports Studies, where we develop that program. But how did I get into this space? It goes back to actually my youngest brother, Kwame Cavil, who was a wide receiver at the University of Texas. And yes, I did try to recruit him to Prairie View. He was a sophomore when Ricky Williams won the Heisman.
Wow.
And he set a freshman record before that. And after thinking he was going to redshirt in about 4 games, James Brown, if you remember him, was the quarterback that legendarily won the championship and beat Nebraska. That kind of sealed his legacy before you seen Mac Brown come in there and really take things to the next level with Vince Young that actually won the entire thing. Interestingly, he bookended kind of with those African-American black quarterbacks, if you would. But in that space, I actually was doing some research on my master's and asked him and a couple of other players about why they would choose, why wouldn't they choose a HBCU? And a lot of it was about having the opportunity to be seen. Which kind of pays it forward today when you talk about HBCU Go and how you did on one of your shows and really talked about the revenue side of it and the space, the understanding how important that is to maybe changing the space. And so that was kind of my first glimpse in it because I got fascinated about the business side of sports and what was taking place when you were watching all this, watching these fans in Texas, seeing his journey as he was traveling. He ended up being a free agent. His junior year, he left early, a Bliffen Call finalist as he was making that move forward. Made some different choices, and so he had to leave the draft a little early. Didn't run quite the fastest time, so he ultimately went a free agent, Buffalo Bills, but made a career out of it in the Canadian Football League. Went back to school, finished his degree, is doing really well now. But I say all that because at that time I was living in actually Huntsville, Alabama. A lot of people recognize Huntsville, Alabama with Alabama A&M. Ultimately found my wife there that is a Bulldog in terms of alumni. But as we're going through that, this is when they were transitioning, if you recall, looking back a little history of coming into the SWAC. So I did a poll. I did a poll ranking, and Pittsburgh Curry goes back to the 20 that used to rank the top HBCU programs at the end of the year and give away or at least announce their HBCU national champion. It ultimately was turned over to Sports Broadcasting Network, but a lot of fans that were on TSPN, SWAC Page Network, shout out to Ken Rashad, SWAC Page, as that is transitioning now to HBCUsports.com.
Yes.
I would list a poll on his site. And I heard all the chatter where folks were frustrated about what I call now the mid-major programs, Division II NAIA programs, FCS
Mm-hmm.
Division I programs, right? How they were all in one poll, and a lot of folks were not comfortable with that in terms of both some from Division II, as well as some what they called then 1AA, now FCS, right? It
Yes.
shouldn't be in the same
Mm-hmm.
poll. So I took it on myself and said, let me get some voters, let me do an algorithm, let me rank them. And so we did that. And I tell that story in such a way because it's historical and it's fascinating as you ask this question because that was literally 20 years ago. So the poll rankings that I release weekly now started 20 years ago, and that's kind of how I got into the business and why I got into the business between my brother and seeing a need with folks that wanted to see something different, and I tried to scratch where it itched.
Wow, and it's crazy because like as someone like myself, I mean, I'm not an HBCU graduate. I'm new to the space, and to hear stories like that, you've been doing this for 20 years, right? Like that, it seems like you kind of you're getting your just due. It was interesting. I talked to Mr. Curtis and I talked to Clint Evans, the other co-founder of HBCU Go, and he was telling me the same thing. He's like, "Yo, we started HBCU Go 10 years ago. You're just now hearing about it right now." So like it's fascinating to see that, not just yourself, those fellas over there, this is years and years of hard work to finally really get some recognition. So to say from the time that you started those polls 20 years ago to now, how have you seen the HBCU sports world just kind of grow? Like what ways have you seen it and what does that mean to you?
It means a lot. I'll answer it starting with that. It means a lot because it means that I had a small piece in that. And more importantly, is just the historical nature of where I've done the research and now to see it continue to move forward and move forward on even larger platforms, I think is extremely important. The more people in the space, the better. People have different angles and stuff like that, particularly if they take the time and are earnest about really shining the light to the program and asking questions about what does this mean. And if you would, you hear a lot of people that are really particular about quote unquote this HBCU culture. And that's why a lot of people are fandom. A lot of people grew up in this, and there's a certain level of attachment. And so anytime you're attached from that, when you see folks do things and you're not sure the way they do it, and do they take the same care that you may have for it, it can make you a little nervous. So I think that's some of that where it came from. But that's a lot in terms of what one of the ways I've seen it is just the social media platform has taken it through the roof of how you can engage really people, not just weekly. We've seen a lot of folks and not through just blog spaces, but now you can see people, you can interact like moment by moment, second by second, it seems, to getting up there. And I think there's going to be some danger in that. But generally speaking, I think that's good because it brings, now we can do this. We can have a virtual meeting. You're over there, I'm over here in these spaces, and we can talk about the synergy and our thought process of HBCU, what I like to call a sporting HBCU diaspora. Some people call it HBCU sports culture, right? Looking at it, the HBCU athletic aesthetics in terms of these different parts of it, which is the second part of my answer, is the fact that you've seen it grow in terms of the television broadcast media part of it. Not just social media, but just the television aspect has grown significantly from when you had tape games on BET. So people talk about BET, but people forget that it was taped. It was not live.
Yeah, the tape delay game, so you know the score, but you watch the game. Okay,
so
that's pretty funny.
Different framework of how we see the games. The basketball has improved. The expansion of the conference, right? Churning. SWAC was one of the most solidified conference for a long time because it didn't have churn. But you go back to 1999, 1998 when you bring in Alabama A&M and Arkansas Pine Bluff coming back into the SWAC. And most recently, obviously, in 2000 when you bring in FAMU and Bethune-Cookman. FAMU, one of the biggest brands, is another way where you see it expanding. And you see that with the championship game. I was speaking with my colleague Charles Bishop on the show when there was a couple of years ago, people forget about this, that they were talking about doing away with the championship game. Before Charles became the commissioner, because the finances of the conference were that unstable and the cost didn't look like they could happen. But there was such a chatter about it that the presidents revisited. Thankfully, Dr. Charles McCullin, the commissioner, found a plan to see about it working, and that's when it actually transitioned from a site location to home campus, and it worked really well. But part of that was the fact that Charles talked about the fact that there were actually 2 generations of folks that grew up with that game. And I had to pause and sit on it because I didn't realize it, that you're talking about a generation who basically didn't know anything else but the SWAC having a championship football game. Mm-hmm. Their expectation is different from those that have seen it before or that just came into space and be like, oh, what's the big deal? It's like, no, that's what I expect. The fact that at the end of the season that I'm either going to make a trip to some location or I'm going to turn on my television and watch a SWAC championship game. That was their expectation. So those are some of the ways that I've seen it change in terms of different ways, including more opportunity for women in terms of sports. Previously, women in terms of soccer, not necessarily being there, seeing softball take on a different life in more aspects, even volleyball in some ways in terms of it moving forward.
Absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Dr. Cavil of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button, like, share, subscribe. Now, Dr. Cavil, you brought up something. You mentioned Commissioner McClellan, and he's been in office since 2018, and some people are critical about some of the moves that he done. But I've been in this space for a little bit, and I like everything he's done. What is your? But you know more about this. You know more about the history than me. What is your assessment over Commissioner McClellan and what he's been able to do or hasn't done since he's been the commissioner of the SWAC?
I think it's dynamic. I've had the fortune to watch Dr. McCullough. I have to be careful because I know him by his first name to some degree and his nickname in a lot of ways. But the commissioner, if you would, I knew him when he was the athletic director at Prairie View. And I saw him literally take a program that was on an 80-game losing streak, that had a significant basketball leading streak, to ultimately winning back-to-back all-conference trophies.
Hold on. An 8-0. 80? You said an 80-game losing streak.
Yeah, and people forget there was also like a 20-game basketball losing streak in there as well.
Wow. Continue. I just want to make sure I heard that right.
Yeah, I came to give you the space and time to let you know that I lived this literally. I was a freshman when the losing streak started. So I saw them literally win the last game my freshman year before they went on that 80-game win streak. So there's some classmates of mine, fraternity brothers, if you want to talk about it, and other good folks that literally came, if you think about it, the year after that.
And never saw a win.
And they never saw a victory. So there were several classes over that period of time that would go to football games, and we would literally cheer when the team would make a field goal, because that was and we can laugh at it now with it, but at the time, it was horrible. And we would celebrate the band, and so that was the culture in terms of us trying to make a win into a literal loss. And so it's big to see him as you get to the point where he leaves and goes to Texas Southern University, builds that, but he leaves a legacy at Prairie View, a winning legacy, where that program still has just come off the fact with several VP athletic directors after him have over the last 2 years won all conference championships. So he starts in a lot of ways. He leaves and then they win under Fred Washington. They win 2 straight, if you would. Then the current Dr. Reed, Donald Reed, in terms of his athletic, they win back to back. So it tells you some consistency. Obviously, people focus on football and they have the one championship in that mix, but they've been in the hunt several times, multiple basketball championships, men, women, soccer. Obviously, that's how you get it, volleyball in that time. But he built that. Then he comes over to Texas Southern. And he does, and I would always repeat to him, I said, man, this is intriguing, Charles. You need to take a step back, because I don't think you realize that. You're doing stuff historically at places that have either never been done or haven't been done in such a long time. So Texas Southern had some of its biggest success under his leadership. And then he started putting out, if you would, understudy. Dr. Kevin Granger worked with him, and now he's leading the program, right? You have the athletic director over at Alabama State, to give another example, that worked with him in the commissioner's office as I transferred to that. And so what I've seen is somebody that is a builder, right, in terms of what that looks like. And so I think what he's done is tremendous. Obviously, there's some things that you may say can be done better, or some questions you have. And sometimes we don't have the information in terms of the directions that the president's chancellors may want to go, some questions they have, some contracts that are already in place that you can't control until they're over with. But you look at that, and the last one is when you talk about the expansion of the conference, to bring in one of the biggest brands out there in athletics at HBCU, some would say in FCS sports, FAMU, that literally won the first 1AA FCS championship in football. I've had some sport championships. You can argue that Bethune-Cookman, when they came in, that they had the best overall athletic program, top to bottom, when you talk about their ability to win in various sports. So you add those brands in there. The new television deal with HBCU Go, as you talked about on your show, and we shared back and forth, the money in terms of that deal that we are hearing related to that puts it in a space that it will be over what the bottom three FBS programs are making as a FCS program. The fact that there's even talk that the conference is considered a plan for going FBS as a conference, which is unheard of. You have teams that do it. So the fact that you have presidents and chancellors considering that and looking at doing it as a unit, whether you think it's feasible or not, or you think certain schools can do it or not, the fact that that is even on the table is significant itself. So I think in a lot of ways, when the book is ended and you read that chapter in terms of what he has done in his space, it's going to be historic. It's going to be Hall of Fame worthy, if not now, certainly by the end of that. And I would say that's at all of those institutions. And I do consider him a friend, but I'm just talking about the record.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the facts, what's on the board of that. And anybody knows me, while I won't be ugly about things, but I'll tell folks in a minute, no, you're not there yet. And I'm just laying those things out there in terms of what is taking place. He literally, as I said, saved the SWAC championship game. Two generations of folks. The decision he made and how he did it changed the trajectory of the conference in that manner. That's significant.
Wow. It is. Yes, it is. And that's why I'm glad that you were able to lay some of those things out. Because like I said, I'm not gonna act like I know everything. And to hear, that's why I ask questions and I hear these things and I'm listening. I'm like, wow, like I didn't know he did all of that at those previous stops. I knew he was at those previous stops, but I didn't know, like I heard about that. I mean, I didn't know it was an 80-game losing streak. I heard about the losing streak, and then I heard about the things he were able to do.
You make me nervous. You can't say it too many times.
I got you. Once again, we're talking to Dr. Cavil of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Now, Dr. Cavil, let's talk about the football season this year. Just from what you've been able to see so far, who is the team, maybe if it's one or two teams, that's kind of surprised you so far through the first 3 to 4 games? Who is that team so far that's like, okay, I didn't, they're playing better than I even expected?
The first one I'll jump out there. And some people are going to pick on me on this one is going to be Prairie View A&M University.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You live in a school that has won multiple championships, that solidified in some ways that program. Obviously, you had the success of Willie Simmons his first year. He was building something, a lot of transition of players, and it kind of dipped a little bit. Then he moves on. You bring Dooley in there that does it differently. And you get the fact that they go to a championship game out of that. And I thought they were a year ahead of schedule, but he leaves. You bring in Bubba McDonald that had never been an offensive defensive coordinator. And so I had some questions on that. Had not obviously been a head coach. But he talked about that he had opportunity maybe to take the job a couple of other times and decided not to. But he knew he was ready in season. He's showing that he's ready.
Yes.
And more importantly, I think, is the fact that the players are bought into him. And you take a deeper look at his coordinators, they've been seasoned in regards to their readiness. And they're showing their style. When you talk about holding a team in the nation 30 points under their average, this is a team that beat Northwestern, not Northwestern State, credit to Grambling, but I'm talking about Northwestern out of the Big Ten in terms of Incarnate Word, the team that they beat in terms of SIU turns around and beats Northwestern. So you got a solid team in terms of what they're doing and what they did to Texas Southern. And after Texas Southern got their big win in Arlington, now you may say that not necessarily the old Texas Southern that you can say, oh, okay, well, look at that, right? They go on the road to Alabama State, beat a team that had 2 wins, one over Howard, that in the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Obviously, Miles, which is a rival to them, looking pretty good. Big-time quarterback in terms of transfer. Yes, he's a freshman, but you can tell that
talented.
His best is he's talented. His best
talented.
So in a lot of ways, I think right now you have to talk about Prairie View being a surprise. Prairie View fans will tell you they thought that, but I'm just saying. You have to look at, to some degree, Alcorn. I think there was questions.
Yeah, same. That was my pick. Alcorn. Yeah.
Alcorn, not questions about the head coach, right? We knew McNair, what he's going to do, Coach Fred McNair. But they were replacing an all-world quarterback.
Yeah.
It seems like forever that just won championships, right? Always had his team in the hunt. Changing at the defensive coordinator position, losing Thornton to Grambling. It was solid over there. They brought back in, an old Cedric Thomas that did it well in a lot previous to that, but still, you just didn't know.
Yeah.
What they've done, fighting tooth and nail with Stephen F. Austin, the top 10 team program there. In every way was right in their game and let it go maybe late, getting the win by making the state late. So you talk about that. In some ways, I would say Jackson State, the way they have dominated, I think people thought they would be good, but I'm not sure people thought they would dominate to the level they have at this point. Particularly, we knew the question going in, the offensive line play. Yeah. The running backs. And they've answered those questions thus far. We figured the defense would be really good, but they seem even on pace maybe to be better than they were, which is a scary thought. But those are teams in the SWAC. Obviously, North Carolina Central in the MEAC, you give a nod to in terms of what they've been able to do early. So those are teams at the FCS level I would give a nod.
Yeah, I really like what Alcorn's been able to do. I really like when North Carolina Central. I didn't know much going into the season, but they've been really, really good. So I'm glad to see what they're able to do, and if they're able to keep it up and head on a collision course for that Celebration Bowl. Now, Dr. Cavil, you spoke about Jackson State and their dominance. Jackson State, they take up a lot of the headlines because of what they're able to do on the field and who their coach is off the field. You know what I mean? Who he is on the field and off the field. Like, we understand that. And you talked about their dominance. I mean, they're beating SWAC teams by 40 a game, right? So, in your opinion, do you think that's good for the conference, for Jackson? Say if they continue this, say they run through the SWAC. And now I'm not going to talk about like a potential Celebration Bowl, but say they continue to beat every SWAC team by 42 points. Even if it's just for 1 year, do you think that's good for the conference? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
That's an important question. For 1 year, I don't think it really matters that much if it's not more than multiple years. You get into multiple years, I think there's some problems with that. It's great for Jackson.
I agree.
In terms of what they do with the brand.
Yes.
But if we take the NFL model, one of the things that works with the NFL model is you hear the any given Sunday.
Yes.
It really works to get people's interest in. So even if their team is not good, we have this coming into the fall where everybody gets excited about their team.
Absolutely.
But it can roll off quickly if your team doesn't do well at the college level. But in NFL, even bad teams can find a way to beat good teams. So
absolutely.
In terms of competition and being able to market this in a such way that you get a different fan interest above and beyond your core fan base, if you would, up and increasing them up that escalator, that fan index. No, you want competition. So from that, in multiple years, you don't want them to dominate that level. But what I've noticed over the years is when you have a team that is that good, everybody starts to improve and chase because they know the target of what they're going at. So there's a question, can that team maintain it, which is one level, or stretch it out themselves? But usually what happens is you find other teams that find a way to increase to come on par, if you will.
And that's what I'm right there with you. So in saying that, what do the other schools, and that's not, and granted, we're only 4 games into the season, 4 games into the season. So, I mean, Jackson State could still lose, right? Like, but they've just been so dominant through the first 4 games. what do the other schools, if they, and once again, they have to play some of these other schools, they still have to see them on the field. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if we're being hypothetical, if they continue to run through different teams by an average of 5-6 touchdowns, what would the other schools have to do to be able to catch up? Because one thing we know they can't do, they can't get Deion Sanders, right? Like he's one of one. So what would they have to do to increase their chances of beating JSU on the football field?
Well, one of the reasons I have everybody talking about the business of sport is because the great equalizer in this country, in a lot of ways in this world, in terms of capitalism, is money. So let's be honest with you. One of the quickest way they can do it, because Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, as you said, is a unicorn. It's one of one, basically. So one of the ways that you can help close that gap is financially outpacing. One of the reasons that Coach Prime is successful is his ability to navigate the space in terms of marketing and putting him out there. But the other way is to leverage his brand with the Jackson State brand and with the SWAC brand in such a way that he acquisitions, if not direct revenue, money, capital, is different types of items that supplement that. Scoreboard, new practice facility, updating the locker room. That's resources. That brings in talent. That's what young folks want. They want these things, and he knows it. That's why he put a lot of energy up front early about saying, no, we can't practice out here. We need a better practice facility, right? He put up the fact that the goal is to build and update even more of the practice facility with the indoor type facility that they can practice on, right? These are the things that allow him to recruit beyond his brand and the other coaches being really talented. Let's be frank with that. Their association. He got the big break of sending a player to the league in terms of being drafted. People recognize that, right?
That helps. That definitely helps.
So you have to find a way to close that gap and to supplement what you're going to do on other institutions with more revenue sources or increasing those things in terms of facilities. If you don't already have it, i.e. Alabama State, really nice facility, they can leverage that. Prairie View, really nice facility, they can leverage that. You see some things in Southern, and you add on to those things, right? You can do that, or you can supplement it by maybe not getting the unicorn of Coach Prime, but getting another significant hire as a head coach. You can do it in that way as well. But I think the resource is probably the best way to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Dr. Cavil of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button, like, share, and subscribe. Now, Dr. Cavil, there's a guy outside of the SWAC, or a coach outside of the SWAC, that I think can end up taking this HBCU football thing by storm at Morgan State, and that's Coach Wilson. What are your thoughts on Coach Wilson up there at Morgan State?
Oh, man. Again, I'm going to give you a little more history about this.
Okay, I'm ready for it. I love this.
I knew Coach Wilson when he was at Texas Southern. Under Coach Wilson, that came down from Howard some 15-some years ago. Then he came over to Prairie View under Henry Frazier, where both of them were at Bowie State, their alma mater. Happened to be fraternity brothers. I won't say the name because I jab him about it all the time. He's not Alpha, so we ain't get no love.
Okay, we ain't getting no shine then, yeah.
But he's a good guy. So he went back home and got a chance to build that program, and he built it in a certain level. And he's from that area, so he knows Baltimore, Washington, D.C., the DMV, like the back of his hand. So he knows where all those spaces are. And he has a relationship with that community in such a way that he has a respect level that he was able to do some things. And as that grew and he could turn it into championship, now even more people say, oh, maybe he does know what he's doing. So what he's doing at Morgan State and what he will do at Morgan State is going to be monumental. And that's why I also say that it's not just about the unicorn, like you say with Coach Prime. It has to be a fit. There are a lot of good fits that make it work for Coach Prime at Jackson State. He couldn't have went just about anywhere and had that same level of success. It really works hand in glove. Credit to Ashley Robinson, VP of Athletics over there, who was previously at Prairie View, previously at Valley, his alma mater. So he's done a lot of work and understands the nuances. And I think these are some of the things that we need to consider a little more about the connection of these folks to understand the years of service they put in there at their craft that a lot of us don't really take the time to understand about why these folks are as talented as they are, because they are at institutions that we need to put this on the table that are institutions of deprivation, because they haven't had the resources by state legislatures that have allocated the appropriate resources to these institutions, which will be interesting as I get back to Morgan State, where they won a lawsuit, which a lot of that money will go to academics, but it's going to trick over to athletics. So we'll also get more resources, which goes back. And I won't run from resources. People like to say folks work hard. Hell, we've been working hard as Black folks and African Americans in the country for a long time. So I don't know.
Absolutely.
Don't talk about working hard. We got folks that know how to do that. We can do that.
Absolutely.
So what we need are opportunities and resources. And when you provide folks with these resources, you see what they do. They achieve. No matter what type of background they came from, no matter what they're doing culturally, where they are in the States, when there are true opportunities with resources, 1 + 1, A + B = C, and you can see a transition quite like none other. And you're hearing it here, like many people think. So I'm not the first one, but I'll say it. Coach Wilson will be successful in terms of what he gets done. Damon Wilson, he is a bad man.
Absolutely, you're right about that, and he's shown every bit of that. You know, with big time wins even this season, first year, and folks didn't think that would even be possible. Now, transitioning back to the SWAC. Now, I want to ask you. We talked about some of the TV deals that have been announced and some of the exposure that's been taking place as far as the SWAC. Some of the deals that Commissioner McClellan has been able to do. Where do you see the SWAC moving forward now with the inflection of talent that we see from either the transfer portal? We see kids out of high school choosing different schools, and not just Jackson State, like different schools. Alabama State's picked up some big time kids. Prairie View's picked up some big time kids. Southern's got some major transfers. Coach Hugh Jackson's doing this thing at Grambling, et cetera, et cetera. Where do you see the conference now going? Now that there seems to be a higher standard being set. It's like, hey, we used to do things one way. We're doing them this way now. Where do you see the conference moving forward now that new standard has been set?
I think it's going to continue to grow. I don't think we've hit the tipping point. To take it back to a marketing framework in terms of business analogy, as you would know, we hadn't hit that tipping point. So it's still on an upwards trajectory. And even when you hit that tipping point, you're still going to make revenue. You still have a time for that. It's still on the rise. So if they get a couple of more breaks, you'll see that. I think television, the next thing you want to look at is when the ESPN deal ends, maybe the renegotiation of that contract at some point. What does that look like? And now that you have something to leverage against with HBCU Gold, that's going to be tremendous. So you think about what you were able to get with HBCU Gold as the secondary rights.
Secondary, yes.
From when there was actually exclusionary rights out the gate. The fact that he was able to move around that and get that changed through the process, work in a working relationship without the courts involved, is another credit in terms of what you see Dr. Charles McCullough is able to do, right? So you add those things up with some dynamic presidents and chancellors. I want to make sure we put them in there because they hold a lot of keys to this, as well as boards of regents and trustees and the chairs of those boards. The more you see the synergy with these individuals being able to work together and navigate this space, along with significant coaches in football, basketball, right, men's and women's, baseball and softball out there, as you see them pushing the envelope, I see a continued trajectory in an upward direction. And I think in some ways it's going to push the MEAC as well under great leadership, right? Because there's a synergy between the two that we need to look at. We talked about Coach Damon Wilson, Coach Trey Oliver, in terms of what he's doing in North Carolina Central. Is amazing as well. And he is obviously, that's his alma mater, but he was at Southern, so he understands the culture. And he figures out that he can do it differently. But I think it's significant when you get the support. And I think some people think there's only one way to do that. The key is what pieces of the puzzles that you can put together to make sure you get the support. There's enough talent out here. If you can get the support, you can get it done in different ways. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing in the SWAC. that folks are going to find their level, their relationship in terms of their confinements of HBCUs, their uniqueness within this unique framework of HBCUs in itself, about what pieces in the puzzle that they need to put together to have the success that you see. And so I think you see a lot of positive arc in terms of more revenue coming into the SWAC. And obviously, when you get more revenue, the more capital campaigns you can do with your athletic department, as well as academically, that will take place. Last piece of the puzzle that I think is important for us to put in here, when we look at the big schematics of this, is not just athletics, but academics. Couple of things that came out with expansion. You brought in an R2 level school, which is FAMU, which, for those that are not realizing, this is a Carnegie classification that talks about the academic financial resources, often related to grant money that an institution has, that can provide some great caveat for bringing in students what helps grow. And as you bring in enrollment, you can shift some of that money over athletics. But you bring in FAMU that we talked about earlier, athletically with the big brand, but also an academic strong brand, R2. Yes. Along with Jackson State, there was an R2 already in the conference, along with Texas Southern in a major market in Houston, that's an R2. That's three R2s. Well, most recently in the next evaluation status that happened this past year, Prairie View and Southern gained R2 status. So you have 5 of your 12 members in the conference that are R2 status, right? Which is significant when you talk about how you elevate these HBCU brands above all, both in a athletic and academic measure. So that's something that I want to make sure that we understood of how the trajectory continues to climb and has not hit that tipping point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Dr. Cavil of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Dr. Cavil, I appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day. I want to get you out on this. So the MEAC has been dominated. You've seen the SWAC get a win in the MEAC SWAC Challenge, but they've dominated that game, and they've dominated the Celebration Bowl. Do you think there's, now that we've seen a win in the MEAC SWAC Challenge this year, and Jackson State's looking as dominant as ever, do you think there's a changing of the guard, or do you think the MEAC still reigns supreme as the premier HBCU football conference when it comes to head-to-head matchups against the SWAC?
Man, that's a great question. I think you got to first just give a lot of credit to the MEAC in terms of the coaches of what they were able to do over a period of time. But I also like to look closer into the data points. And I think we look at the overall arc, and that's clear that it's been dominated by the MEAC, whether you're talking MEAC SWAC Challenge or the Celebration Bowl. But if you start looking a little closer over what has taken place over the last couple of years in terms of a smaller sample size, you've seen that these two conferences have been more equal than it going to either way. The last four years, you look at the matchups between the Celebration Bowl are like 2-2 per conference. Same with the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Prairie View has won in there in terms of that year. Southern won as well over South Carolina State. That's when the game was played in Southern for the 2 years. Went to Bethune-Cookman. Alcorn was leading Bethune-Cookman before that game got canceled for Lightning. So over the last couple of years, that record has been closer. And then when you look at the championship game, if you look at the game in terms of how it was played, other than that last one when A&T just beat up on Alcorn, making the game, having basically a 3-game score, all of the rest of the games over the Celebration Bowl have been like a 1-touchdown game. So I would say to you that the difference level of the conference is a lot closer. So you might see a run from the SWAC, but I don't think it's going to be anything that dominates that level in such a way that you can put a clear declaration. What I've always tried to tell everybody, that these two conferences are much closer than anybody wants to give them credit to.
Absolutely. This is Dr. Cavil. You can catch him over at Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Dr. Cavil, I appreciate it taking a few minutes out of your day speaking with me, and we got to have you on again. I learned a lot in these last 40 minutes or so. You put me up on a lot of games, so I loved every minute of it.
Appreciate you. Appreciate the invite. Continue to do what you do. Continue to bring the light in so many different ways and educate the fans out there, entertain the fans. And anytime you need me back, you know I'm just a call away, brother. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is once again Dr. Cavil. His show is Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. You can check that out on YouTube and all different kinds of different outlets. Dr. Cavil, I appreciate you again, and we will see you guys next time.